In 1256, Ruknuddin Kursha, then 26 years old and leading an organization globally recognized as the Assassins, stood atop the ramparts of Mandus Fortress, surveying the valley below. For 166 years prior, his lineage had instilled dread in monarchs, caliphs, and emperors alike. They had executed 2 Abbasid caliphs and numerous military commanders, even compelling Saladin, the revered hero of the Islamic world, to retreat. Yet, at that moment, an army of over 138,000 Mongol warriors was laying siege to the fort in the valley beneath him. Their siege engines relentlessly battered the seemingly impenetrable walls daily, and food stores were dwindling rapidly. Ruknuddin faced a profound decision that would shape not only his own fate, but also that of tens of thousands of individuals, warriors, families, and children within the more than 100 fortresses awaiting his command. He considered 3 options: fight to the bitter end, preserving honor but guaranteeing inevitable losses; surrender and hope for Mongol clemency; or was there a third path altogether? The predicament was immense. What to do when you alone hold the destiny of thousands in your hands, and every choice could lead to catastrophe? Before we delve into his ultimately controversial decision, share your current location and time in the comments. I'm curious about the diverse audience and time zones tuning into this. To grasp the profound significance of that mountaintop decision in Persia, let's rewind 166 years. In 1090, Hassan ibn Sabah, a 40-year-old Persian scholar, confronted an seemingly intractable challenge. He adhered to Ismailism, a niche branch of Shia Islam. In a world dominated by the Sunni Seljuk Empire, which wielded power through violence, there was no place for individuals like him. They faced persecution, harassment, and execution. Hassan's dilemma was straightforward yet brutal. How could a minority community, lacking an army, territory, or military might, survive in such an environment? The typical response was that survival was impossible. They would simply be annihilated. However, Hassan refused to accept this fate. He grasped a vital truth. He could not defeat the Seljuks on a conventional battlefield. Their army outnumbered his followers by a factor of 100. Yet he didn't need to triumph in direct combat. He merely needed to make the persecution of his community so costly that they would reconsider their actions. The first step was establishing a secure base, a location the Seljuk army couldn't easily assault. In 1090, Hassan fixed his gaze upon Alamut Castle, a fortress hewn into a 200-meter-high cliff face, protected by sheer drops with only a single narrow path leading up. Instead of attacking with an army, he entered the Alamut Valley as a teacher and missionary. He educated and assisted villagers, gradually converting them to his doctrines. He even swayed the guards within the castle. And so, in 1090, without a single drop of blood spilled, Alamut's gates swung open for Hassan. Legend claims he even compensated the former owner 3,000 gold dinars, as if it were a routine business transaction. This initial victory imparted a crucial lesson. Sometimes, clever application of force surpasses brute strength. But a lone secure fortress wasn't enough. Hassan required a strategy to deter the Seljuks from assaulting his communities across Persia. And he devised a strategy whose ethical implications we still debate 900 years later. Hassan trained an elite group of warriors known as Fidai, meaning those ready for self-sacrifice. These individuals did not engage in conventional warfare. Their mission was different: assassinating influential figures who posed a threat to the Ismaili community. In 1092, the first assassination reshaped history.
Nizam al-Mulk, the Seljuk government's head and the architect of the anti-Ismaili campaign, was returning home after his workday. A man disguised as a Sufi approached him, ostensibly seeking a blessing. In that instant, a knife plunged into his chest. Nizam al-Mulk, the most powerful individual in the Seljuk Empire after the Sultan, succumbed on his journey home. Some might label this terrorism, others might call it asymmetric warfare, the only means for the weak to defend against the strong. History doesn't offer simplistic answers, but it reveals the outcome. For the next 166 years, major empires, the Seljuk, the Abbasid, and even the Crusaders, had to meticulously consider their actions before confronting the Ismailis. They knew that if you persecuted the Ismailis, you could become the next target, and no number of bodyguards could provide 24/7 protection. Over these 166 years, the Nizari Ismailis developed an intricate network. They either built or captured over 100 fortresses throughout Persia and Syria. Each fortress was chosen for its strategic placement: high mountains, difficult access, independent water sources, and provisions sufficient for sieges lasting many years. Alamut transformed into a center of learning. Hassan established an immense library, reportedly housing up to 400,000 volumes. Scholars journeyed there to study astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. It was more than a military organization. It was a cultural hub. The roll call of those who fell victim to their assassinations reads like a historical chronicle. We find 2 Abbasid caliphs, numerous Seljuk generals, and high-ranking officials. Conrad of Montferrat, destined to be the king of Jerusalem, was among them. Even Saladin, a revered figure in the Islamic world, narrowly escaped 2 attempts on his life, saved by sheer luck. However, it's crucial to grasp a key point. They were not indiscriminate murderers. Every assassination was carefully calculated, serving a precise political goal aimed at safeguarding the Ismaili community from perceived threats. This was asymmetric warfare in its purest form. When direct military confrontation is impossible, one changes the adversary. For 166 years, this strategy proved effective, until they encountered an opponent operating under entirely different principles. While the Nizari Ismailis were constructing their clandestine dominion across Persia, a formidable new power was emerging far to the east. Genghis Khan consolidated the Mongol tribes, forging what historians would later describe as the quintessential war machine. The Mongols were distinguished not merely by their savagery, though they were indeed ruthless. Their exceptional traits lay in a combination of flawless organization, unyielding discipline, and most significantly, an unparalleled capacity for learning and adaptation. When faced with robust fortifications, they adopted siege warfare tactics from China. When river crossings became necessary, they mastered bridge construction from Persian engineers. Their methods were fluid. They consistently sought the optimal approach for each distinct circumstance. Between 1219 and 1221, the Mongol forces swept through the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia. The devastation wrought there served as a chilling warning to the entire Islamic world. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Merv, once jewels of Islamic civilization, were obliterated. Estimates of the casualties range from 2 to 15 million people. Yet, not every city met destruction. Some conceded immediately and were spared, while others resisted and faced total annihilation. The Mongols delivered a straightforward and brutal message: surrender promptly and live. Resist, and everyone will perish. Choose your fate. This wasn't mindless brutality. It was a calculated act of violence, designed to compel every subsequent city to consider its options carefully before offering resistance. In 1251, Monk Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, ascended to the position of Great Khan. He surveyed the map, identifying 2 remaining obstacles that barred the Mongols from absolute dominance over Western Asia: the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, the spiritual heart of the Islamic world, and the Nizari Ismaili strongholds in Persia, places that had troubled every empire before them. Monk entrusted this critical mission to his brother, Hulagu Khan. This choice wasn't based on Hulagu's reputation for cruelty, but rather on his superior organizational skills. In October 1253, Hulagu departed Karakoram with an unprecedented army. It comprised over 138,000 warriors, and crucially, it wasn't solely cavalry. Hulagu also brought 1,000 groups of Chinese engineers, experts in constructing trebuchets, siege equipment, and assault machinery. This was the decisive difference. Previous empires had assailed Nizari fortresses and failed because they possessed only armies. Hulagu had technology. The Mongols had assimilated the lessons learned from China. While cavalry could traverse the steppes, breaching solid stone walls required sophisticated machines. The army advanced slowly through Central Asia, taking 2 years to reach Persia. However, everywhere they passed, they solidified their authority, summoning local rulers and demanding contributions of troops and intelligence. This was no swift raid. It was a meticulously planned campaign with impeccable logistics, geared towards a singular objective: the complete eradication of the Nizari Ismailis. By 1253, while Hulagu was still en route to Persia, the Nizari leadership grasped a critical truth. If they allowed Hulagu to arrive in Persia with his full army, their defeat was assured. They needed to thwart this campaign before it even began, and they devised a plan so audacious it bordered on delusional. Assassinate Hulagu Khan, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, within his own capital of Karakoram. If successful, Hulagu would be forced to retreat. The Mongol Empire would plunge into a succession crisis, and the campaign would effectively end. 400 of their most skilled assassins were selected. Disguised as merchants, missionaries, and pilgrims, carrying goods and gifts, they began a 1,000-mile journey along the Silk Road eastward, towards the heart of the Mongol Empire. This was arguably the most daring assassination attempt in history. 400 individuals traversing 1,000 miles through hostile territory to eliminate the most heavily guarded man on Earth. However, the Mongols possessed their own extensive intelligence network. Reports surfaced about an unusually large caravan of merchants heading towards Karakoram. Special security measures were immediately implemented, and the conspiracy was uncovered. The 400 assassins failed. Now, Hulagu Khan had not only strategic, but also deeply personal reasons to dismantle the Nizari. In late autumn of 1255, Hulagu crossed the Amu Darya River and entered Persia. He did not rush directly to Alamut, recognizing that would be a misstep. Instead, he employed a methodical siege tactic, what military experts today refer to as peeling the onion. General Kitbuka was dispatched ahead to assault smaller, remote strongholds in Kuistan and Kumis. The objective wasn't an immediate total conquest, but rather, firstly, to probe the Nizari defenses to comprehend their combat strategies. Secondly, to isolate Alamut from its supporting fortresses. Thirdly, to sow panic and disunity throughout the Nizari system. Each fallen fortress inflicted a wound on their network, representing not merely a material loss, but a psychological one. The belief in their fortress system's invincibility crumbled before their very eyes. In December 1255, amid this crisis, the Grand Master Alauddin Muhammad passed away. Various accounts exist regarding his death. Some claim he was assassinated by his confidants, who disagreed with his anti-Mongol policies. The true cause may forever remain unknown. However, the outcome was clear. His son, Ruknuddin Kursha, at just 26 years old, was forced to assume leadership under the most unfavorable conditions. Imagine yourself in his position. A 26-year-old youth, newly at the helm of a movement, with the world's most formidable military machine looming on the horizon. Fortresses were falling daily. Internally, some blamed his father's policies for provoking the Mongols. And now, all eyes were on him, awaiting his decision. Ruknuddin attempted negotiations. He dispatched envoys to Hulagu, offering obedience, tribute, anything to avert total war. Hulagu presented his demands: the destruction of all fortresses, complete unconditional surrender, and the handover of all armaments. This was a condition Ruknuddin could not accept, as demolishing the fortresses would strip his community of its sole means of defense. The Nizari Ismailis would be utterly defenseless against any who wished to persecute them. But if he refused these terms, the war would persist, with a new fortress falling each day. Ruknuddin was caught between two dire choices. In the autumn of 1256, Mongol forces besieged Meymundiz, the fortress where Ruknuddin resided. For a week, Mongol trebuchets relentlessly bombarded it. Walls several meters thick, built over generations, began to crack and crumble. Each man-sized stone hurled by a trebuchet struck with terrifying force. The sound of each impact against the wall echoed throughout the valley. After every hit, dust billowed. Inside, food supplies were dwindling. Water remained due to an independent well, but there was no food. Children began to cry from hunger. Warriors grew weaker. And each day, Ruknuddin stood on the walls,
gazing down at the Mongol army, realizing he had to make a decision. On November 19, 1256, Ruknadin made a decision that shaped the course of history and would be debated for another 770 years. He emerged from the fortress gates unarmed and surrendered to Hulagu Khan. Some historians later called this an act of betrayal. Others considered it the only realistic choice. But to grasp his decision, we must place ourselves in his circumstances. Inside the fortress were not only warriors, but their families, women, and children. Had he fought to the end, the Mongols would have massacred everyone, as they had done in Khwarezm. Outside, dozens of other fortresses still held out, trusting his leadership. Had he perished there, they would have lost central command and been defeated individually. Hulagu promised mercy if all fortresses surrendered. Other empires in the past had accepted Nizari submission. Why should the Mongols be any different? Ruknadin likely believed or hoped that by surrendering, he could save at least a portion of his community. He could not have known he was making a terrible mistake. Following his surrender, Ruknadin was ordered to send a message to all remaining Nizari fortresses, commanding them to open their gates. Some warriors in the garrisons were suspicious, believing Ruknadin was acting under duress, but most obeyed their imam's order. On December 15, 1256, the gates of Alamut, the legendary fortress that Hassan ibn Sabah had captured 166 years prior, without a single drop of blood, slowly opened before the Mongol army. They entered.
They found no paradise gardens or treasures as Western legends claim. They discovered an immense library, perhaps 400,000 volumes. Ala al-Din Ata Malik Juvayni, a Persian historian at the Mongol court, received permission to select certain works for preservation. He chose copies of the Quran, several astronomical treatises, and some Ismaili texts he deemed valuable. The remaining hundreds of thousands of volumes on philosophy, science, mathematics, and Ismaili thought were burned. We will never know what was lost in those flames. Perhaps there were scientific works that were ahead of their time. Perhaps there were philosophies capable of altering our thinking. We will never know. But the story didn't end there, and this is the most painful part. Ruknadin, believing he had fulfilled his part of the bargain, requested a meeting with Hulagu Khan in Karakoram. Perhaps he sought to secure the future of the Nizari Ismailis under the Mongols' protection. Hulagu concurred. Ruknadin and a small retinue embarked on an extensive eastward journey, eventually reaching Karakoram. However, Hulagu Khan declined a meeting, asserting that some strongholds, such as Lamsar and Girdka, remained unyielding, thereby nullifying any agreement. On their return path to Persia, the Mongol contingent received definitive orders from Hulagu Khan. Ruknadin and his companions were executed. In adherence to Mongol customs concerning rulers, he was trampled by horses, a bloodless demise. Subsequently, a directive spread across Persia to eradicate all Nizari Ismailis, sparing none. As Malik Juvayni documented, over 100,000 Nizari Ismailis were killed in Persia. In Khuestan, Mongol commanders assembled Nizari adherents, promising amnesty, only to then annihilate approximately 12,000 individuals in a single day. The Lamsar fortress fell in January 1257 after a cholera outbreak. Yet, Girdka, a smaller fortress, endured for an additional 13 years, surrendering solely in 1270. This event likely stands as one of history's most systematic mass exterminations, targeting not just warriors, but also women, children, and all who adhered to the Ismaili faith. In 1275, nearly 2 decades after Alamut's fall, something remarkable occurred. A man claiming to be Ruknadin's son rallied surviving Nizaris, launching an assault and recapturing Alamut for several months. The Mongols were compelled to return and reclaim the fortress. Nevertheless, the message was unmistakable. Even after such devastation, their spirit persisted. And today, 770 years following those occurrences, the Nizari Ismaili community continues its existence, numbering around 15 million people across more than 25 countries worldwide. Their spiritual leader is Aga Khan IV, representing the 49th generation descended from Muhammad. They no longer engage in assassinations. Instead,
They contribute to education, healthcare, and societal development. They discovered a means of survival not through aggression, but through perseverance, adaptability, and the quiet preservation of their identity. So, what insights can we glean from this history 770 years later? The Nizari Ismailis devised a strategy perfectly suited to their circumstances: asymmetric warfare. For 166 years, it proved exceptionally effective. However, when confronted by an adversary possessing superior technology, virtually limitless resources, and, crucially, disregarding traditional conventions, this strategy proved inadequate. No strategy remains invincible forever. The world evolves, and what once worked can become obsolete. Ruknudin faced a dilemma where no option was favorable. Fighting to the bitter end meant immediate death for everyone. Surrendering offered a slim hope of saving some, but also risked tragedy. We often wish to evaluate historical decisions from our comfortable vantage points, equipped with all the past and future information. Yet those who made these decisions lacked such foresight. They contended with terrible choices and minimal time for deliberation. Before condemning, ask yourself, in their position, what would I have done? And be honest. This perhaps is the most encouraging lesson. Despite persecution to the brink of annihilation, the Nizari Ismaili community survived, not through violence, but through resilience, adaptation, and the silent safeguarding of their identity. They grasped that sometimes survival outweighs honor, sometimes bending is more crucial than breaking, and sometimes altering form is the sole way to preserve essence. The ruins of Alamut still stand in the Alborz Mountains of Iran. Crumbling walls on a 600-foot rock face, overlooking a picturesque valley. It is no longer a fortress of assassins nor a symbol of fear. It is merely a relic, a reminder of people who once believed they could endure through fear, of an empire that once imagined it could dominate perpetually, and of the inevitable clash when two such forces intersect. And it reminds us that in history, very few things are constant. What appears impregnable can collapse. What seems destroyed can be resurrected. The important thing isn't never to fall, but how you rise after falling. So, together we have explored one of history's most dramatic confrontations, where an indomitable fortress met a perfect war machine. Now, I want to ask you, if you were Ruknudin on November 19, 1256, standing on Alamut's walls, gazing at the Mongol army below, knowing your decision would determine the fate of tens of thousands, what would you have done? Fight to the death? Surrender with a fragile hope? Or is there a third choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know your perspective. And feel free to engage in civilized debate with those who disagree. That is how we learn. If this video was valuable to you, please click the like button to help more people see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss other in-depth historical narratives. This story is not only about the past, but also about lessons for the present. Yes,